Hello, today's date is March 21st, 2009, and it's about 12:47 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I am interviewing a gentleman by the name of Winston Wu. This is for the Roller Steve Show, and Winston is back. This is the second interview I've done with him. This is episode 2, and he's going to talk about arranging tours, the different type of packages, like when people go overseas, what their expectations are. I'll let you take it away, Winston.
Well, first of all, let me say that arranging a tour overseas or a trip, as I'd like to call it, is a lot more easier than you think. I mean, a lot of it is just good common sense. You have to ask people, experienced travelers, questions, um, and it's a lot easier than you think once you do it. You just have to get over the fear, the hurdles, the comfort zones, the procrastination. It's too easy to do nothing and to take the path of least resistance, and overcome what people think. But once you get used to it, you build confidence and you start to get better at it. The first thing you need to do, of course, is to select the country you're going to, and that takes a little bit of research, not just on the internet, but in talking to people too, and getting a vibe. And you got to decide. I mean, if you're going to another country to meet women or to date women, you got to select the best market. For example, I'm an Asian guy, and America is not a good market for me because Asian males are considered the least attractive of all the races. And plus I'm 5'7", and most women in the U.S. want a guy over 5'9". So I'm kind of out of the market in the U.S. But if I look globally, at all the other 200 countries out there, I find that, let's say I prefer white women. For an Asian guy, then Europe would be better because there's less, racism in the dating scene towards some countries in Europe than in the U.S. Even in Britain, I mean, a lot of Asians say that, even though the women in Britain are similar to the U.S., that there's less of a racial. There's less racism against Asian males there in general, so there's less of a racial hang-up about dating an Asian male. So that works in their favor. Blacks mention this too, and so do Arabs, that the British women treat them better than their American counterparts, even though they're somewhat similar, according to some people. So even Britain would be a better market, but what's even better would be Eastern Europe, because the society is more open and inclusive, and it has some of the luxuries and culture, the rich culture of Europe, and at the same time it's very open and inclusive, and Eastern Europe tends to be more of a poorer part of Europe, so people are going to be more and more open and communal and inclusive. There's going to be more of a camaraderie, but you can find that in Western Europe too. I mean, you can go to, depends on where you go. I mean, to Spain or wherever. So Eastern Europe is good. Also, Eastern Russia is good for Asian men too, but more so on the east than on the west, because on the west there's sort of a racism against Asian males, but on the east, it's more closer to China. So theoretically, according to what I've heard, I've never been to Eastern Russia, but from what I've heard, the Caucasian women in Eastern Russia, they like Asian culture, they like Asian people, and they're fascinated by it. So it would be a good place for an Asian guy to meet women there too, if they like Caucasian women. And South America is always great too. I mean, especially Brazil, but it all depends on the different countries. And one of the countries, the country I've been living in the past 2 years, which is the Philippines, is awesome for both Asian men and white men. Because over there, my race doesn't work against me, because they like foreign Asian men, and most Filipino women aren't that tall, and they don't have anything against a guy that's 5'7". So over there, I'm given a much higher market value. There's a lot of women that I can choose from, that are friendly to me, that I can meet easily. So definitely all the factors of the market in the Philippines
Right.
is on my side. And yeah, gives me the upper hand, and and that it's just wonderful because I wake up every day with the feeling like I'm wanted, I'm desirable, I can get dates, I'm not an outcast, I'm not at a dead end where like I was in the States
Right.
where I couldn't get any dates and couldn't do anything about it. And another good country is Thailand because they like Chinese people, they see Chinese people. A lot of Chinese people own businesses there, so they kind of are seen as the owners
Hmm.
of the business class over there in Thailand, plus yeah, foreign Asians are given a high status there. Also, China too. I mean, in China, the women like foreign Asian men because some like white men, but it's more convenient for to date a foreign Asian men because
Right.
their families are more accepting of it. Most of them have old-fashioned parents, and of course, most people feel naturally
Yeah.
inclined to date their own race too. So,
Except for
and
Philippines,
and
though. I
there's a
think the
lot of
Philippines is pretty much
Chinese women.
open because
Yeah.
it seems like a lot of Filipino are marrying white guys, and plus they do speak English there, and there's not as big of a language barrier. But what do you think of overall if you're a white guy and you want to go to the Philippines? I've thought about that in the future, maybe go to the Philippines and at least see what it's like out there.
Mhm. Yeah, the Philippines is actually one of the best places for both white guys and Asian guys. I mean, it's the least racist country in Asia. It's very open and inclusive. I mean, if you go to Japan, for instance, I mean, people don't make eye contact there in public very much, um, and it's kind of like
Yeah,
mono
very much so.
national.
Yeah,
It's
even
very
with other
ethnocentric, so
Asians.
it's very yeah. Yeah, they're very shy and reserved, and so it's not that easy to meet that many people there unless you're living there and and you build connections slowly. But you're not going to have all the choices you have in a very open and
Right.
fun society like the Philippines, for example. So definitely the Philippines would be really good for that, and plus, yeah, and most Filipino families have no problem with interracial dating, and the Filipino family will and it's the most of the Philippines is very pro-American too. So um, so so there's many factors working in your favor. Plus, I mean, most Filipinos speak at least some English, so the language barrier is not an obstacle as much there. So you got to consider all these factors, and I mean, different countries have different pros and cons. I would say most countries out there, if not all, have a better dating scene for men than the United States. But it also depends on who you are and how well you fit in.
Yes.
There's many
Could it be a
factors
Winston? Could
involved.
it be a problem? Let's
Um,
say, I guess a lot of guys that would go to your site think it's a smorgasbord of women, but could you see yourself going to a foreign country and feeling as much at home as you would if you were in the United States? In other words, in the dating scene, you go there and you think, "Wow, I'm going to meet all these women," and then you go there and you find out that the women treat you the same way in America or that more than likely won't happen, considering the fact that our culture is unique in and of itself.
well, most guys who go overseas actually feel at home instantly. They feel like they can be themselves because it's kind of hard to explain, but in the U.S. There's kind of an awkward ice barrier between strangers, and in most countries in the world, people talk to strangers very naturally and comfortably. So it's kind of like when when you meet someone that you have a lot in common with, and you feel like a kindred spirit with, and you feel like you've known them for years. There's an instant rapport and camaraderie with that person. It's kind of like that. I mean, most guys that I know who've gone to Europe, even a lot of American women say this. When they go to Europe, they feel a lot more at home there. I mean, it's a lot less pretentious. It, people act a lot more naturally, and they're more they have more of an inner life, not just an outer life. There's a balance between an inner and an outer life, whereas in the States you're kind of taught to focus only on the outer world, the outer life, rather than developing an inner life, um, and then having some culture within you. So yeah, the majority of people that I know feel very much at home in the U.S. So much to the point where when they go back to America, they kind of feel alienated and they kind of feel down and depressed because they're not as comfortable as they were in that other country. So I mean, yeah, going to a new country has different experiences and stuff, but most of the time those new things are positive, not negative. It's hard to explain, but there's kind of a genuineness that a lot of other countries have. That makes you feel like you can be yourself. You don't have to give fake smiles and say, "Oh, how are you?" Great. How are you today? Like whenever you walk into an office in the U.S., you have to say how are you, and then you have to say that you're
Yeah.
great, and then you can talk about the
Right.
weather and all kinds of
Yeah.
bullshit like that, going through that
Everything else
fake
I wanted to say
conversation in
about
the
this
office,
country
is fake,
seems
but
to
everyone's
center
assuming
around having an ulterior motive. Because if we walk up to a woman and start talking to her, what is her ulterior motive on her mind? Is that we just want sex? Or if we go up to a person and we talk to them about, let's say we're a life insurance salesman and we start getting friendly. Oh, you just want to sell me a life insurance policy. We always seem like we have a motive, and we've learned to almost be distrusting because of that. I don't know what your opinion is. I think in other countries, people maybe are not as commerce oriented. They do want to socialize because human experiences are definitely valued as more important than the 9 to 5 or working 80 hours or 60 hours a week.
Yeah, you do notice that most people in other countries are less paranoid. They don't think that every stranger is some potential psycho, and they don't live in fear as much. And people are more warm. They're more interconnected, so they have more of a relaxed attitude toward meeting people, befriending them, and just showing them around. And most people, will if they have the time, they'll show you around and they'll make the time. I mean, um, and they see that as a positive experience. Um, Especially in Europe, for example, or in Russia. If you look different, if you're from another country, people see that difference, in a positive way. They want to get to know
Right,
you because you're different. They want to learn about your
right.
differences. It doesn't create
I, I
a barrier
I
between
think
you and
that you're
them.
saying so. You have to
Um,
prepare these trips obviously because you can't just go. The idea of winging a trip is not possible. Like just saying, okay, tomorrow I'm going to hop on a plane and go to the Philippines. You probably would have to at least have 10 ladies lined up that you potentially, if things didn't work out with one, you could visit the other one.
you could, but you don't have to. I mean, a lot of people do it spontaneously and have good results.
Right, that's
I
true.
mean, if you look at it, most things don't go according to plan, anyways. I mean, few things in
Right,
life ever do. You have to learn how to flow and adapt to the situation. And
right.
but
Could you
as
yeah,
Americans, we're kind of taught to plan everything,
could you
out
realistically
in
see
a
it
lot of
like, let's say
detail.
you go to the Philippines, you
That's
go
our
to
logic.
Manila. Could you see yourself just as a guy? You don't speak the Filipino language, but you walk out there and you start basically just chatting with a girl, and before you know it, you're invited over to her house and meet her family. I mean, how does the process work? Because where would you meet? You're not going. Is the bar a viable place to meet a woman? If you do go on a 2 3 week trip to the Philippines, what is the best place to go? I mean, I'm asking this question because it sounds interesting.
Well, pretty much anywhere. If you're in a country that's open and inclusive, you can meet people in the park, at a bus stop, at the mall. You don't have to go to a bar or a church, or be limited to being introduced. But it depends on the country you're going to. For the Philippines, definitely you can meet people anywhere. But so a lot of it is just where you are and when and who you meet. But you'll definitely meet a lot of people. And some of them you'll click with, some of
Right.
them you'll click with less. But the people definitely act a lot more natural and warm,
Right.
and that's one of the things that guys like about Filipino women is that they have a smooth tenderness and femininity that is missing in most American women, and that tenderness feels really satisfying to the male senses. And
Right.
once a lot of guys will tell you, including me, that once you experience that, you don't really want to go back, to women who are much more masculine and not tender, and much more cold when they touch you. But yeah, that is one of the highlights of the Philippines. But I mean,
Hmm.
in general, it's a great place, but I mean, it all
Right.
depends on who you meet and when, and there's luck involved, there's destiny involved, there's timing,
Right.
and if you believe it, like people attract like. So when you're in an
Right.
area
But I
and,
mean,
and
like
somebody else is very
there's
similar to you,
proportionally, let's say, for
there'll
instance,
tend to
in the
be some
Philippines, more
coincidences
single women than there would be
that bring you
men.
together
In
to
other
that
words, if I
person.
went over there, or any guy who's interested in meeting a woman overseas, more than likely you would probably have your pick more than you ever would here. I'd mentioned before, I tend to think that there's a ratio imbalance with 30-somethings, and that's just my opinion because it seems like every average to not so average looking girl has somebody in their life or several options on the way or in their favor. So, yeah, it sounds pretty good. Other areas that you would not want to go to? How about Mexico, for example? Does Mexico is even closer than the Philippines? Do Mexican women like American guys? Or I haven't seen much advertised in that department.
Yeah, and I was wondering about that. As far as Mexico, I mean, I've heard mixed things about that. Some say that it is great. They found the love of their life there, and they had a great time. And other people say that it's people are very friendly and open, but the girls kind of prefer their own, and they're kind of they want to be Catholic virgins. So it just really depends. As But definitely it is a poorer country, and it's more communal, and people are more open and naturally relaxed and open and friendly. So for sure it is, but as far as dating, I mean, I've heard mixed things about that. Some guys do have a good time, and others don't really recommend it. But I've only been to Tijuana, which is on the border to San Diego, and that's not a very good representation of Mexico because it's kind of a you know crime infested, prostitute infested place. So even Mexicans don't really like it there very much. So I can't really say from personal experience, but from what I've seen, I mean the women did seem sweet and natural and humble and innocent, and I that makes them attractive in my eyes. Another good thing about the Philippines is that
Right.
the women there are very open to men who are much older than they are.
Yeah.
So it's not uncommon to see guys who date women or have wives that are 20 or even 30 years younger than them. So if you're an older guy in the States, like if you're 40 or
Minder.
50 and you want a girl that's 20, the Philippines is a good place for that because they're very open about
Right.
big age differences there, whereas in some
Sure.
countries, they only want less than a 10-year gap. So that's another thing to consider. It depends on who you are, your age, what you want, your race, whether you want Asian, darker women, if you want Caucasian, or if you want Hispanic, if you want black. It all depends on what you are looking for. All that needs to be taken into consideration. But I want to also clear up this myth that travel is always expensive. I mean, there are many ways to get cheap airfare, including Priceline.com or buying those special deals where you get the unsold airfares at the last minute. There's that. You just have to be more flexible. If you're more flexible, you can find cheaper deals on airfare, hotels, etc. But if you arrange it
Right.
all
I
at a
see.
travel agency, or on the internet, they tend to have access to the most expensive
Right, and
hotels
plus,
and car rentals. I
if you
mean,
meet somebody
because yeah, I mean,
online
if
too, I was going to
it
say if
depends
you
on
meet
your budget.
somebody online,
If
like
you're
I know
rich, none
somebody
of this
who
really
went
matters.
to the
But if
or not
you're
the
on a
Philippines but
budget
Thailand,
like me,
you can stay with them, so you can eliminate all of that BS right there. Because if you're actually going to go there to meet one particular woman, she may have a place already hooked up for you.
she can. But most girls in poor countries probably live with their parents or some of their sisters, so you won't have much privacy. It's best to find a hotel or rent an apartment in that area so you can have
Right.
privacy with her. Plus, if it doesn't work out with her, you can find. I mean, you're going to go out and meet other girls too, so it's good to have your own place. But what I was going to say is that I mean, if you go with if you go to if you book hotels on the internet or through websites or go to Google and type, find
Right.
hotels or cheap hotels, you're going to get the most expensive ones because the most expensive ones tend to have advertised on the internet. If you want like a decent, clean place that's cheaper and affordable, that's not a piece of crap, but not too expensive either. You have to, it's better you have local connections there that you can ask people, or you can just arrive in the country, get in a taxi or bus, or have a friend there and just ask them to take you to a decent hotel that's not too expensive because every country has many hotels that aren't too expensive. Even in an expensive city like Moscow or London or Tokyo, you can find $20 or $30 hotels, but not on the internet. You'd have to have a local person take you to them. They do exist.
Right.
I mean, they're just not advertised, but they definitely are there, and you can get deals on apartments too, and so there's definitely, if you're on a budget, there's definitely ways to do it, especially if you go to a poorer country like the Philippines or Brazil or Russia. I mean, there's definitely many options that allow you to spend less and where you can do it on a budget. So it's not as
That's
expensive as
interesting.
people
Yeah,
imagine,
I think you're right on the money too. It's not
there
as
are ways to
expensive
get
as they
around
make it out to be.
the high cost of travel.
You've traveled to the Philippines.
It's
You've your favorite hotspot is probably the Philippines, or did you like Eastern Europe?
I like them both, but for different reasons. I like Eastern Europe for its culture and its
Erotic.
museums, the
Oh yeah.
churches, and the really good food there, and the way people, the women dress there is so fashionable and attractive, yeah, and flashy, and they have really good fashion sense, and a lot of people tend to be very intellectual there, even if they're 19 or 20 years old. I mean, you'll find this in Europe. 19-year-old girls can talk about a lot of things. They're very cultured. They have a lot of knowledge in a lot of areas. You'll find this a lot in Spain, in Eastern
Right.
Europe, in Italy. They just learn a lot. They're very aware of everything around the world. They speak multiple languages. So if you're an intellectual guy and you like intellectual women, I mean you'll definitely be amazed, about how intellectual the young people can be in Europe. They're not into like trash culture, like a lot of American teens are, um, and they just act a lot more adult-like. But yeah, I like Eastern Europe for its culture, and for the Philippines, I like different things. I mean, the
I
women
think so
are,
too.
are,
I
are
find
have
out
a
women
little more
because
darker complexion,
money is a factor too.
different
In a
types, and
country where it's a
for
little
dating,
poorer,
I'd
they'll
probably say
appreciate you
I
more
like
just the fact that
Philippines
you
better
can
because
provide a job and a place. I think in Eastern Europe, uh, it's really hard. I don't know what even in my nationality is Ukrainian, so you'd think I would know more about it, but I really wouldn't know what to expect from say a Ukrainian woman over in the Ukraine in today's day and age. She might have high expectations that I'll be a millionaire, but the Philippines, a lot of guys seem to go there and have success. But uh, let's see, we talked about how about family ridicule. We've talked. That's another issue. Do people feel stigmatized by going this route?
well, that's definitely one reason why a lot of guys, I mean, are afraid to do this because their family might ridicule them. I mean, it's probably less of an issue in America because families in America aren't that close, anyways. Once you're 18, you're kind of on your own. So most people don't really care what their parents think. They just do whatever they want. I mean, within their means, but definitely you risk alienating your parents, your siblings, your cousins, your aunts, your uncles, and even your coworkers. I mean, if they find out about it, most guys that I know who have gone to Europe or Russia to date women or to meet them online or whatever, they tend to not tell their coworkers or their boss about it. They tend to tell them
Yeah,
some story like, "Oh, I got relatives there and I'm meeting," or "I'm just going there to experience the culture." they don't tell them that they're going there to meet women. So they kind of have to be discreet about it, and especially if
You know how I would
people in your
respond to
office, I
that
mean, if
if
there's
I
a
were
lot of
dealing
women
in
in
that
your office
situation.
and they
I'd say,
find out
okay,
you're
you're
dating foreign
criticizing what I'm
women,
doing. Why don't
they
you
might,
set me up with one of your
view that
friends and
very
see how quick they shut
negatively,
up?
and
Because they
so
know that they don't have any friends to set you up with. You see, that's another thing I've noticed about American culture years ago, and this is why men are in the dilemma of having to go overseas. Is many of the one of the options is because it used to be that in America, if you were a guy and you were single or a woman, you know, somebody always knew somebody. Have you ever heard of anybody saying to a guy, "Oh, you're single? I've got the great gal for you." That doesn't it does it's unheard of today.
yeah, and I mean, plus most people don't know that many people either because we're kind of isolated in our cars and offices and homes, and most people don't meet that many people. So most people in the States probably don't have a big social network where they can pull people out and introduce you to them. So and
Yeah, every man
plus
for himself.
they don't want to feel responsible if anything goes wrong too. There's kind of this mentality like, oh, it's your responsibility, you got to do, it's your job just to find someone. Yeah, and the ironic thing is I mean, if the American women
Right.
don't want you, and they don't want you going overseas to find women, then that's kind of a catch 22, So and also the social life, I think, in the States is a catch 22 too, because
Right.
I mean, on the one hand, you generally can only meet people through other people by being introduced through other people. But at the same time, I mean, if you don't meet anyone, then you're considered a loser. So it's kind of like if you don't have anyone to
Right.
introduce you to anyone,
I know this is going to
then you
sound like.
can't meet people.
Go ahead.
So
I'm
then you're
sorry.
seen as a loser either.
Oh, I was going to say.
So you're kind of
Oh,
put
sorry. I
between a
thought you were
rock and
cutting
a
out.
hard place. Um, but just go ahead. Oh, I just wanted to.
Okay.
I'll go ahead. uh Well, I just wanted to talk more about traveling. I mean, there are ways of traveling cheaper, and as far as planning goes, it is some people are very spontaneous. They can go somewhere without any planning and then wing it. I mean, you can do that. You just have to be very flexible, and you have to talk to a lot of people because people will help you if you're friendly and nice and you ask for help. People in foreign countries will help you along and help you get to where you need and help you find a place. They'll give you a ride too. I mean, there's a lot of people who hitchhike around the world, for example, that for years even that just they always wing it, but they get away with it because they're really nice people and they're always able to find nice people that'll help them. And but it depends on your personality if you're willing to be that open or not. But for most people, I'd say it's better to have some type of plan, like not a very detailed plan, but a very general plan. Like I mean, I always have a basic plan, but you got to understand that most things don't go according to plan. So it's good to have a plan, but you got to be willing to acknowledge that the plan may change, and the plan has to be a little bit flexible. And it's good to have a backup plan in case your first plan doesn't work out. So it's always good to have a basic plan and then have some follow up plans, and to realize that you have to be flexible with that and to have backups too, because you might go there and meet someone off the internet that you think you're going to hit
Right.
it off with, and maybe she's not what you thought
Right.
she was, or maybe she lied, or maybe she turned out to be a scammer, and I mean, you never know with
Right.
someone you
How
haven't
about a
met
group of
yet, and you
guys?
don't
Like
know what the
maybe meet some
chemistry is
guys
going to
on
be
the
like.
internet who have a
So if that
camaraderie
doesn't
with
work
you.
out,
Maybe want to all
it's
kind of
good to
group
have a
together
backup
because,
plan. You should
see,
have
what's good
a
about
few
meeting
other
other
people you're going
foreign
to meet,
travelers that are guys, even if
and
they're not going to be in competition. Like it's not like four guys going to the bar trying to compete with fewer women. You're going to be have a smorgasbord of choices. So you'd almost be better off hooking up with maybe some guys on the internet who might be in your area and say, hey, look, we're going to the Philippines to see if we can find a potential wife, and would you like to, go hang around? It would be a lot easier to be a little more camaraderie, I think.
hmm It would. It would be good for some people who are afraid of going to another country for the first time. It'll help alleviate your fears if you're with a group of people. Plus, when you go out as a group, I mean, it's safer too, especially if you're not familiar with the area. It's definitely, it definitely helps you feel safer. There's more of a camaraderie. But it's not
Right.
essential. It's not really necessary. If you have some good local friends in that country, they'll help you. They'll help you. I mean, find other local friends
Yeah.
and then you can
Right.
hang
How
out
much
like
money would
that
you want
too.
to
But
get if
so
I went
it
to the
is a good idea.
Philippines,
But
for
but you
example?
don't. If you're there to
Once
meet
you get
women, you don't
yourself
want
there,
to spend too much
$1,000
time just
spending
hanging
money,
out with guys
2,000.
too.
What
And
kind of, if you wanted to live
occasionally
cheaply,
it's okay.
could you
But
still have a good time
you
there on
want to
about a
focus.
thousand bucks for a couple weeks? Right.
Well, you definitely can live cheaply and still have a good time. It just depends, on your spending habits and how luxurious you want your hotel to be, how many conveniences you want. I mean, as for me, I'm fine with traveling cheaply on a bus or on a jeepney, using the public transportation. But some people, they need
Yeah.
to rent a car, they need to have a private driver. I mean,
Right.
it just depends on the person. And some people need a nice
Right.
hotel, and they need a translator too. It just depends. I mean, it depends on. I'm more of a simple type of guy, so I
Right.
don't need all of that stuff. But some
Right.
people do, and some people don't. And it depends on your budgeting skills too. Some people just cannot control their spending. They just spend whatever they have very quickly, and they lose all their money quickly. And other people know how to conserve,
Oh,
and
geez. I
but
heard
but
about
when you're
that.
when
That can be
you're in a
that.
foreign
Like in other words, you
country
got to buy a
where
gift
women
for
are
the
poor,
parents.
there's
It's
going to
kind of
be
a
pressure
tradition in
from
a lot
some
of
of the
countries
women
that you got to
to
buy
get you
them
to
a
spend
gift,
more,
and
not
so
just
yeah.
buying
Well,
stuff for them,
that's
but for their
a good
relatives
point
and
there. And
friends
then
too.
so the
But
process is you meet a girl there, then you got to stay there a couple weeks, and then what? You can get her over to the United States within how long, and how does that work? Right.
um, if you want to bring her to your country, first of all, you got to go back to your. I mean, this is America, for example. You got to go
Right.
back home to the states, and then you got to go to your local INS office, which is the
Right.
Immigration and Naturalization Services Department, and then you got to start the process. You either do a fiance
Oh
visa
my God.
or you do a spousal
Just to
visa,
get her
but the
over
spousal
here?
visa is only if you're already married. With the fiance visa, it can take a few months. It can take
Okay.
eight
Well, if you're
months. It can
making
take a
something,
year.
then
It just
that's
depends
okay.
on
So
the
then you get
office.
her over.
Yeah.
They can make it
Plus
pretty
there's a
tough for you.
minimum income requirement. You got to be making at least poverty level income, which is like $20,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like 20. Oh, go
Yeah.
Um, it's getting tougher, with the more stricter immigration laws, but it's still doable as long as you
Right.
get a background check and meet the income requirements. Even if you fail the income requirements and you aren't making at least 20,000 a year, if you can find someone who will be a cosigner, like a relative or a parent, that can also be achieved, but that person has to be willing to take
Right.
responsibility. But there's some risk in
Right.
that because if she comes over, I mean, you got to get to
Yeah.
know who you're bringing over. You can't just be blinded by love.
Oh my
Sometimes there's
God. Yeah,
bad
that's another
signs,
thing.
and you
That's
can
the scary.
tell
So in other
she
words,
doesn't have good intentions.
I've heard that. So
I mean,
basically,
if
she
she
could
leaves you and goes on
choose to go
welfare
on some sort of
or payments,
welfare,
I mean,
and
you're
but
responsible for
couldn't you get
paying
her
those back to the
deported? Because
government.
now that
So
becomes
so
an issue
uh,
that what? How does that work? Oh wow, that's scary.
well, you could try, but I mean, if she wants to stay
Hmm.
in America, then she could start filing false domestic, abuse charges, and this happens occasionally, but I wouldn't say it happens in the majority of cases, but I mean it does happen to some people, and when it does, I mean those cases get a lot of attention. But
Yeah.
as long
Yeah,
as
it sounds like
you get to
she's
know who you're dealing with, I
yeah.
mean, then I mean you can avoid that. Usually if a woman is going to do that, there's a lot of bad signs. I mean,
I see. Yeah, if she doesn't,
there's a lot of red flags in
oh, you do.
advance.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
if she seems cold, if she
there's
seems
lots
cold
of,
at the
like, for
wedding,
example,
I
I mean,
mean,
she might be
it's kind of
cold
like if
to
she's
the
not that
touch,
bubbly, giggly
or she
girl that
might
you
look
knew,
unhappy at the
or
wedding.
it's kind of like you
I
almost have the
mean, I
vibes that
know
the
I knew
girl
a guy
likes you
who's
or
had.
not.
Yeah, go ahead. Oh yeah, your gut instinct will tell you whether she likes you or not, and it's also how she touches you, how she treats you. I mean, a lot of little things will tell you a lot, over time, and it's very obvious. But if you're in love and you're desperate, and sometimes you're kind of blinded to other people's faults, and you don't see those things. I actually knew a guy that brought over a girl from the Ukraine. He married her in the Ukraine first and brought her over. Then she left him, and then he went to the Philippines and found someone who totally treated him right. But the thing is, before that happened, one of my friends saw his wedding video, and she said that she obviously didn't look very happy in the wedding video at all, and it was very
No,
obvious,
no, that's
and
a
she
big
could see
mistake. It's
that
kind of like
that
saying, "Hey,
she
baby,
wasn't
you'll
even
learn to
into
love me."
him.
It
But
doesn't work that
but
way.
he kept,
Well, listen, Winston,
people tend to
I'd like to have
rationalize
you
those
on
things away.
again.
They
I
think,
had a
oh,
great conversation.
she may
There's
not
so
be
much
into me
about
now, but
this
she'll change
subject,
later. The
and
love will grow later.
where do people get in contact and they want to find out more about your site?
Well, the link is at www.happierabroad.com. That's HAPPIER abroad, ABROAD.com. And my email's on there. There's a link to the forum if you want to go there and chat and introduce yourself. I got an ebook and uh, essays and contents and testimonials. You can find it all on the main menu. So come visit my site if you're
And thank you. And
interested
well,
in
this is
global
episode
dating,
two
and,
of the
and
Roller Steve
the
Show. And
possibility
thank
of
you
going
again, Mr.
overseas
Wu. Bye bye.
to have a better love life. And so I welcome you and thank you for your attention.